We want to bring in CBS News political director Steve Chaggaris now. He's joining us from Washington. Steve, what a week.
You're telling me.
There's so
it's Friday,
much to
right?
talk about. It is Friday, TGIF.
Okay, thankfully.
So it seems like Republicans have no choice but to move forward in a bipartisan way on health care. Do we have any idea what that might entail?
No, actually we don't, and that's the thing. First of all, I don't think we're going to see any movement on this anytime soon. I think this is something that is going to be on the back burner now for Republicans after what happened this week, and I think this is going to work through the committee process. But it's interesting, you know, you hear Democrats, you heard Minority Leader Chuck Schumer earlier in the month say, yeah, we're happy to talk to Republicans about this, but here's what's off the table. Tax cuts are off the table, cuts to Medicaid are off the table, and it's not really, I don't think, a starting point for Republicans. So I don't really see where they sit down and try to figure out how to hammer out something bipartisan when they're so far apart already on this. And frankly, when you have so many Republicans who, at the end of the day, really want a repeal of Obamacare, and Democrats do not want that. So we'll see what happens in this bipartisan thing, but I just don't see where the starting point is.
I want to get your reaction to all the drama that unfolded on the Senate floor last night, shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning, including that decisive vote by Senator John McCain. What did you think when you saw all of that happen?
Well, you start with the theatrical part of it, which you saw in Nancy's story, which was over the course of an hour. You had the vice president talking to John McCain. You had him talking to the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, and talking to Democrats, and then talking to Mitch McConnell, and then the thumbs down. And from a standpoint of people who maybe sit and watch C-SPAN 2 in the middle of the night, that's about as exciting as it gets, right, over the course of an hour, seeing all that. But aside from that, I mean, you listen to what McCain said afterwards and the reason why he voted against it. He said it, quote, fell short because it fell short of our promise to repeal and replace Obamacare with meaningful reform. And that gets to the bigger issue of Republicans should have seen this coming. They've been talking about repeal for 7 years, yet they have never been able to agree on what to replace it with. And so when the president won in November, you think they would have all gotten together and said, we're going to figure out a way to come up with a replace bill that will get through both houses of Congress. Yet, even though they knew the final exam was coming, they were cramming at the end, and they put together this skinny repeal, and it just didn't get enough votes.
Steve, we mentioned those tweets from the president this morning after the vote, who wrote, quote, if Republicans are going to pass great future legislation in the Senate, they must immediately go to a 51-vote majority, not senseless 60. Even though parts of health care could pass at 51, some really good things need 60. So many great future bills and budgets need 60 votes. So is this something we've heard from the president before? What do you make of it?
It's weird. I think his math is off. I mean, he's basing it sort of on this repeal and replace bill that the Senate Republican leaders came out with last week, and then there was the discussion of this Byrd rule in which some of the provisions in there would have to go for 60 votes. But overall, that bill did not have the support that even this skinny repeal bill did. And that's why they didn't even, I mean, I think it lost by 8 or 9 votes. And so it was further away than the skinny repeal. So the math was off. At 60 votes, 51, it doesn't matter. They didn't have 51 for what he's talking about anyway. So I'm not really clear on what the president is referring to here. And perhaps some would say that he's not totally clear on what he's referring to here either.
Steve, you mentioned that Republicans have been working for 7 years to try to pass the health care to repeal and replace. Obviously, Republicans control the White House and both houses of Congress, and they still weren't able to get that repeal passed. So what does this say about the GOP's ability to get anything done moving forward on issues like tax reform and even the budget?
Well, it makes you realize that 52 votes in the Senate, 52 seat majority, or 52 in this Republicans in the Senate, it's not enough. It's too slim of a majority unless you have everybody on board, unless you have all your ducks in a row before you start going for these big ticket items, then you're going to have a lot of trouble. And I think they're going to see that with tax reform and tax cuts. Republicans are nowhere near understanding where they're going on that. There are all sorts of ideas out there. Everything we've seen so far is pretty vague. And if they want to get some sort of signature tax reform legislation together, they're going to have to figure out how to do that and get to 50 votes. But 52, having 52 when you need 50 votes, it's a slim margin of error there.
Slim indeed. All right, before you go, tell us who you have coming up on the takeout this week.
So we have Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton from Massachusetts, an Iraq War veteran who was elected back in 2014. And he's been pretty vocal, not only against President Trump, but also against Democratic leaders in Congress. It's a pretty interesting position to take. He saw what happened in these special elections this year and said that the Democrats don't have their stuff in order and they need, I think, a shakeup at the top. And it's just sort of interesting for him to go bucking Nancy Pelosi and others. And he called for really sweeping them out of office or sweeping them out of their leadership positions before the midterms if they want to win next year.
All right, if you haven't listened to it, check out the podcast, The Takeout. Appreciate it. Steve Chaggaris in Washington for us. Happy Friday.
Thanks, Meg. You too.